Long Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host for today, P.T. McNiff, and I'm here with a fellow virtual park citizen. It's Antonio Elefano. How's it going, Antonio?
The thing about life is that sometimes you win, but sometimes you have to watch your enemy steal what could have been yours. I'm doing great, PT. How are you?
I am good. I am excited to chart a path of vengeance and retribution with you. So we sound differently here because Antonio and I are here with another installment of Quick Takes, a subseries where one or more Long Take Review host offers some brief spoiler-free reactions to films they have recently seen. As regular listeners likely know, we are in the thick of the Oscar season for movies from 2025. Nominations came out last week, and we promise we have full plans to get some more episodes soon about nominated movies we have yet to cover. But Antonio and I wanted to jump in to give some quick takes about new movies from 2026 that we saw this past weekend through the Sundance Film Festival. To reiterate, as we discuss these movies, we'll be keeping the conversation spoiler-free. It's unclear when some or maybe even all of these movies will be coming out for general audiences, so we don't want to ruin it for anyone, but we wanted to share our reactions and excitement from the and some disappointments, probably, from things that we watched over this past weekend. Before we begin, a little programming note. If you don't want to miss new episodes when they drop, please follow the Long Take Review wherever you get your podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Even when she's not here, she still hosts the feed. But you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. And we are also on Letterboxd. You can follow the account at LTR Pod, or you can search for the hashtag LTR Pod to see what each of us individually has been watching. And if you did that over the course of the last few days, you would have seen Antonio and I clocking these new Sundance movies. But Antonio, for our listeners, what's a little background into this film festival of Sundance?
Sure. So the Sundance Film Festival is the largest independent film festival in the United States. It was founded in 1978 by the late great actor Robert Redford, named after a resort he owned in Utah, which is in turn named after his character in 1969's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Through the years, it has helped break the careers of some of the biggest names in film, including Quentin Tarantino, Todd Field, Steven Soderbergh, and a trio relevant to the current Academy race, Paul Thomas Anderson, Ryan Coogler, and Chloe Zhao.
Through the years, besides being a launching pad for filmmakers, it has gained a reputation for being a powerhouse showcase for documentaries. 15 films that have been awarded the Documentary Feature Oscar premiered initially at Sundance, including 4 of the last 6 winners. And all 5 of the documentary features nominated this year for the upcoming ceremony were also Sundance premieres, so the winner will carry on that tradition, add more numbers here. And all of that isn't even counting films that were supported by Sundance Labs or funding programs. They're very crucial to the documentary ecosystem.
Dramatic films have also followed the path from Sundance to Oscar glory. In just the last 10 years, these have included acting and or screenplay wins for movies like Manchester by the Sea, Call Me by Your Name, Get Out, The Father, Judas and the Black Messiah, Minari, Promising Young Woman, and A Real Pain. Coda is the only Sundance film to add a Best Picture win to acting and screenplay awards.
In addition, and of course, more importantly, Sundance movies have performed well at our own LTRs, the Letters Awards. Past Lives, Dee Dee, and I Saw the TV Glow all took home awards in previous years. And just this year, just earlier in the month, we saw, I guess technically last month because it's February now. Well, whatever. But recently, we saw nominations for Sundance premieres: The Ballad of Wallace Island, Sorry Baby, If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, and Train Dreams. No spoilers on if any of those took home wins, because that episode hasn't dropped yet, and I don't know if this is coming out before the winners come out.
This year's festival was the final one in Park City, Utah. Starting next year, the festival will leave Utah for the first time to Boulder, Colorado. Now, I actually attended this in person in the early 2000s. I had just started law school, and I had a friend who went to school at Brigham Young University. So I had a place to stay. He was close by. Um, but he was also a devout Mormon, so he couldn't watch the majority of the sacrilegious filth put on by hippie Hollywood. But I could. So I remember he would just drop me off. He would go. He was good. He would go like work in the creamery, like the ice creamery, that was his like extra job. And then I would just he dropped me off at the film festival, and I'd go watch whatever I wanted to watch. And I had such a great time. It was my first film festival, and I was just there by myself. And there's just this undeniable energy being in proximity to like just fellow movie lovers and industry people. And it's nice to see these films driven by real, if sometimes raw, visionaries before critics have had a chance to really shape the discourse around them. Unlike with studio releases, you don't have as much like buzz or early reviews to sort of guide you. You just have like a description, a cast, and you take your chances. And the result is that you're going to see some stinkers, but you're going to see some really interesting cinema too. And if you're lucky, some emerging artists. Also, you might get to see some like famous people. For years, I had like a framed photo of me and a very uncomfortable Bonnie Hunt from my time at
Yes.
Sundance.
I mean, Davis rules. That's just what a legacy. Do you remember what your favorite movie was, or maybe slash and or the most successful movie that you saw at the festival? Did any of them have like a little breakout moment, or create a little long tail outside of the festival?
Unfortunately, the one that I remember the most has a more ignominious sort of like
Hmm.
history. I remember that a friend of mine in my MFA program years later was described a film that he thought he hadn't seen the film, but he had heard about it, and it had a legend as just like the most ridiculous worst film made. And he was telling the group of us, and I was like, wait, I saw that. Like I saw that live, like I saw that with the cast and whatever. It was a movie called Tiptoes, I think with Matthew
Oh,
McConaughey. Yeah,
Gary
I
Oldman.
saw. Yeah, Gary Oldman. Yeah, so I because I watched this under the sort of strange circumstances, I just sort of like showed up at Sundance and was like, I need a movie. What can I see? Everything that was like that people were like really wanting to see was already sold out. So I just grabbed whatever else, right?
Sure.
The movie that I saw with Bonnie Hunt was something called Loggerheads that I remember was just like kind of okay. But Tiptoes, I remember feeling like this is really weird, but maybe this is just like what film festival movies are like, right? Whatever. Um, so yeah, that's the one that I remember the most. Like I've been to one other one, Toronto. Well, other than the Newport Beach one, which we've gone to together.
Sure.
But Toronto, the Toronto Film Festival, I got better at sort of figuring things out and getting things early and making sure that I grabbed some of those marquee things early. But this was just my first time, and I just sort of like grabbed whatever. Also, interestingly, at Sundance, there was. I remember I sort of wandered into um, a like a satellite festival that was just like on the periphery of Sundance,
Oh.
and didn't realize until I started watching that I was like, this is some type of like strange like Christian festival that's
Ah.
happening. And then had to extract myself from that to get back to the proper Sundance Film Festival. So anyway, weird adventures, but weird things happen when I'm by myself sometimes.
You're like, get
So
me back to Tiptoes. What is
yeah,
happening?
give me. That's right.
Uh,
That's right.
I will say I have friends with whom we will occasionally, once every few years, someone will just send out onto a thread the Tiptoes trailer, and I recommend
Oh
anybody
yeah,
watch it, because yeah, it
yeah,
does seem like this is like a Mad TV parody of an attempt to make
yeah,
an awardsy movie, but it's
Yeah.
real, and I don't think anyone who's in the cast ever likes talking about it in interviews, because they get asked sometimes, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, like we tried something, I guess. Anyway, next question. But that's amazing. I'm jealous of you for being able to actually go and have been in Park City, especially now that that era has ended. From our perspective, I don't want to say this is the important thing, but from our perspective, the thing that's relevant to us today is that since the first Sundance Festival held during the pandemic, during January 2021, a cool month that was just chill and everyone was having a good time in the world, they've started offering online screenings for at least some of the movies being shown there. And as members of the general public, you can just, if you are paying attention and or someone alerts you, and by someone I mean Jen, who is paying attention, will say like, "Hey, the tickets are going on sale." You can just go online and buy a ticket to see one of these movies. And there's an allotment, so some of the ones that are like Antonio was saying about his real life is or in person experience, some of them sell out pretty quickly, and others are around for a little while. So we both were able to get some tickets to some screenings, and through this online virtual offering, we had a chance to catch some movies, and we would like to talk about them today.
Before we go get into our takes on what we saw, I would really like to hear why you picked the specific movies that you did. I think that like you can tell a lot about a film goer based on their chosen festival slate. And given that we had sort of limited time for the online offerings, there was just like a very limited window. It was basically like a weekend where you could watch all those movies. So given that, I think in a normal like in-person film festival, I would probably try to watch 2 to 3 movies a day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's just like because you're there for that, right? But in real life, like with other things going on, I with the online for me, I only chose 3, and PT I believe you chose 6, which is great.
I chose
Um,
5.
you
I
chose 5.
respect
Okay.
that you were trying to get me into a sixth, but it was only 5.
All right. Well, so for me, since I had only 3 to pick from, I like generally like to see a range of films at a film festival. So at least one comedy, one drama, and then sort of something else in my wheelhouse, like maybe a stagey ensemble piece, maybe like a romance. And since I was only seeing 3, I also went a little safer than I would if I were like spending a week watching movies. So I chose things with at the very least sort of cast I knew. If I were seeing 2 or 3 a day, I think I would have been a little bit more expansive, both in terms of genre and being like more experimental and seeing more sort of international films. But that's what I did with my slate. Is so you'll see a comedy, a drama, and then a romance ish kind of thing. PT, what about you?
So I'm not like overly devoted, I hope, but I do like the idea of like getting some degree of feedback about like this movie might be good or this movie has
Yeah,
got
yeah,
like
sure.
hype around it.
Yeah.
So I did the like a little googling around like what are the movies that the critics are excited for, that they hadn't seen them but they were uncertain. So that was sort of an initial, okay, here's a pool of potential things. And then I went through the descriptions of those movies, and picked, what were the ones that stood out. Again, maybe because I was going a little bit longer. This is partly because, yeah, it is only 4 days. Like it's like Thursday morning to Sunday night are the window that you have. And I have the benefit of not needing to maintain the care of any children during some of these days or any of these days. So it's easier for me to say, or I could do like a couple more. So I picked 3 movies directly by title, and I didn't really go by genre. It was more the sort of feel of like, okay, I think this could be interesting. It was really sort of ended up being a kind of like bittersweet coming of age like movie that was kind of billed more as a comedy, which we'll get into. I think it was funny, so I think that's fair. But I went into it thinking it was going to be more like straight comedy, and then a sort of a high school teacher based comedy that again I'm excited to discuss. That's one of the ones we both saw. And then I do a midnight category, which is sort of more like horror movies, spooky movies. And there was one where I was just like, oh, I was, I thought I was like, this looks good to me. This looks right in Jasmine's wheelhouse, and I will be able to report later a little bit more. But it for sure was. It was her favorite movie of the competition. And then for the other 2, I got the, you can say I want the grand jury prize winners in different categories, or the audience award winners. So I did the grand jury prize winner for feature movies, which ended up being Josephine, one of the movies that you had picked on your own. So you correctly predicted this would be a good movie, and a movie that would be worth seeing here. And I also did the documentary just because of what we mentioned earlier about how documentaries are so big here. So I don't normally like rush out to watch documentaries, but I was like, oh, let's do it. And so that was the other thing. So it wasn't so much a sort of mixture of genres as it was a distillation of input and feedback from what are people kind of excited about, what do I see that kind of gets my attention, and then letting the jury tell me what was worth seeing, and which presumably then would get some hype afterwards. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I personally know enough about the other things that happened at Sundance to discuss the other movies too much. Listeners, if Jen doesn't cut this out, that was the next thing that was on our agenda. That, I mean, I put it down, but then I was like, I didn't read anything about the rest of Sundance. That this would be the moment when Jen would step forward and be like, I listened to 5 podcasts and I read a bunch of articles because I stay on top of everything, and I'm organized. But alas, Jen could not join us. So we're just going to jump into the movies we saw. And with all of that, I could have done a great transition from talking about the documentaries to the first movie that I saw on my own, which is that documentary winner, which was Nuisance Bear. And this is a story about, I mean, they follow one polar bear, but it's about sort of polar bears in general up in Alaska, and this, you know, interesting ecosystem of problems that has been created by people, but it's the climate change has created shifts in the formation of ice in the area, and the polar bears sort of have the instincts about like where they need to go at what time, and also like where their sort of food supplies will be, and that's been changing because of the like increase in ocean temperature, and so they're kind of thrown off in terms of what's going on, and that has led to earlier separations between parent like mama bears, literal mama bears, and their cubs, and so because of that, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't think I'm spoiling that they talk about this in the movie, but they sort of talk about how they sort of learn from their parents how to interact with the human world and be safe, and so they don't really learn that, and so they start just like wandering into towns because they're like, all right, I guess there might be food over here, which causes problems for humans, and then the humans, and especially in like the more traditional American white communities and touristy areas, and then they like find ways to kind of, say like, no, 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 like get out of here. But when they push them out of here, they go to Inuit lands. And then the Inuits are like, what the hell? Like, what is happening? And so it's this interesting ecosystem problem, and following all these different threads of folks, like gorgeous nature photography, and like, you fall in love with this polar bear, but it's also like, this is a threat and could like maul anyone that it comes across. So it was very well done. It did feel to me like, anytime I think I sit down to watch a documentary, in addition to not being as organized as Jen, I'm also not as diligent at watching all the Oscar nominated movies as Greg, our other absent co-host. So he watches at least 5 documentaries every year, and usually many more. And I kind of feel like I'm sitting down to eat my vegetables and be like, okay, here we go. I'm going to get a good message here. But I did get sucked in to this story, and I thought it was really well done. And so, I have no barometer on like what's going to happen here. But if you told me that it's going to be one of the movies nominated in a year for best documentary, I would be like, yep, that seems totally worth it. Like I'm not shocked or surprised. It was definitely worth seeing. And I think if anyone out there who is a nature lover, an animal lover, if you have an instinct, you throw on the Blu-ray of Planet Earth and just kind of zone out and sink into that, or you want to sort of follow the story of animals that are, uh, you know, uh, plagued by humanity, and also to a degree humans plagued by people, and people plagued by other people, because that's, all these threads. Great, like really really good. It was not surprising to me. I was not like shocked or concerned that this had won the grand jury award. This seemed like a strong choice. So, thumbs up on Nuisance Bear.
All right. Well, I'll move us then to a movie that we have in common, and also moves us in a completely different direction, which
Yes.
is the musical. Um, so this one, both of us chose independently. We didn't consult on our lists ahead of time, but this one we both wanted. I think Jen also chose this one as well. So this is a film by Giselle Bonilla. And in it, an acidic Will Brill, the actor Will Brill, plays a middle school teacher whose ex-girlfriend and coworker, played by Jillian Jacobs from Community, who's now paired with their boss, a preening principal played by Rob Lowe, as kind of like a factory outlet version of his Parks and Recreation character. Um, the principal desperately wants the school to get a blue ribbon designation, so Brill's character Doug hatches a plot to launch the most offensive middle school musical possible to get Lowe's character fired. And so I read the premise, and I kind of knew pretty early. I was like, well, I want this one. Right? Like even like a kind of bad version of this will still be kind of fun, especially with this cast. Um, and overall, I think the satire wasn't as sharp as it could have been. It reminded me. I think I read your Letterboxd review where you said it compared to, but not favorably to, films like Theater Camp, and I think that that's right and fair. Most of my laughs came at the end of the movie during the unveiling of the 9/11 themed musical they put on instead of West Side Story. Um, Still, for me, it was a perfectly fun, imperfect movie, and a significantly better time at the movies than one of my other three choices that we'll get into later. So, what did you think of the musical, PT?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm in the same area where you are, where I was like, oh, like maybe there's a version of this that just like really locks in. It has. I saw. I mean, I did flip through some of the Letterboxd reviews after I sort of put mine in, and I was seeing some people saying it's not like mean spirited enough to be like super duper dark, but it's not funny enough to like justify how mean spirited it is. And I think it found some space in between for that, but it's definitely like, one of those movies where if you go in thinking about like, well, I think that I want to watch characters make rational choices that make sense, that are going to, logically lead them to the outcome they're looking for. This is not going to be it for you, because this is about like, one person, and then to some degree, the people around him making choices that are just like debilitatingly bad for their future. But it was, I feel like the overall arc of it all was sort of just like, okay, this is fine, but there were like consistently enough moments where I was chuckling or laughing, and some, frequently at the audaciousness of some of it, but even some of the smaller things. There's a phone hang up moment that I was just laughing about for like 5 minutes. That wasn't like, it isn't even like that's that funny, but I was like, I was low level, yeah, chuckling about it. And yeah, this felt like a good, solid, like mid-tier festival experience where you're like, this movie looked like it could be fun. I was hoping, I mean, I don't think anything's going to get to like a Waiting for Guffman for
Oh
me.
yeah,
But like Theater Camp, like I was like, oh, maybe this could be like approaching Theater Camp, but it doesn't get there. Like Theater Camp was more successful than this, but I wasn't upset that I spent my money and time watching
yeah.
this movie. And I don't know how, where exactly it's going to go or how far, but some yeah, some fun times. And yeah, I do think it was its strongest parts were at the end, as things sort of all came together, which leads to a better experience than when something starts
Sure.
off like gangbusters and then fizzles out.
Also, since you mentioned Waiting for Guffman, we should say a quick rest in peace, Catherine O'Hara, the wonderful,
Yes.
great, brilliant Catherine O'Hara.
Yeah. I mean, who was incredible in everything, and we were so such a bummer. That's one of those celebrity deaths that came out of nowhere that
Yeah.
it feels like this person had decades left of stuff to give and
Yeah.
was still working at the top. So
You and I found out from a text from Jen. I was at Costco, and I was so bummed out. As you're already a little bummed out when you're walking through Costco with your family, but but yeah. So anyway, and we one of the last things, actually, the last movie that the three of us, you, me, and Jen, saw
Mhm.
together was Best in Show at my place, which is, I think, the height of the Christopher Guest movies, and one of her most brilliant performances out of just like a collection of brilliant performances. So anyway, all right. So the musical, like I think it was perfect, again, perfectly fun. And I think I don't know if I'd heartily recommend it, but I think it's a fine time, and not a waste of time at all, right?
Yeah, if the things that we were saying sound like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, I can get down with that. Like, I don't think it's going to win anyone over to this kind of movie, but I
yeah.
think it'll find an audience and it'll get a little like cult support through the years of people who are just like, yeah, just like want to see a bitter guy just burn everything down around him, and have fun with that.
So now we're going to move to another movie that only you saw, that I'm very curious about. Rock Springs. PT, tell us about Rock Springs.
Yeah, so Rock Springs is this was the midnight movie. So I think it's categorized as horror. There's a little there. I think there's a little more to that. It's certainly in the tradition of the more recent. It's a horror movie, but really it's about trauma. It's written and directed by Vera Miao. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I apologize. And it stars Kelly Marie Tran as the mother, sort of in the middle of a multi-generational family, who and I don't think this is spoilers. This is the opening scene is setting this up. Is that her husband has passed away, and she moves with her mother-in-law and her daughter from a unnamed city to a small town, sort of in a rural area in Wyoming called Rock Springs, because she gets a teaching job. She's a cellist, and she gets a teaching job as presumably a music teacher at a nearby college. So she moves into this house. Spooky things start happening, and the history of this town with regards to Asian American immigrants, Chinese American immigrants in particular, from back in the building of the railroad type days and the maintenance of the railroad. So back in the late 1800s, the legacy of that in both the spooky energy in the area around them, and also amongst the current townspeople, and that what like their sort of inherited memories and lore all start to create friction. And there's I don't really want to say that much more about it, because I think that's already sort of setting things up. But there's I think this movie was, uh, was very effective. I think the big knock on this one, and I don't think this was wrong, is like how it was pretty slow. It was very kind of meditative. If for those of you who may have watched Train Dreams, which is also up in the Northwest, and dealing with a similar kind of like turn of the century, technology and time period and people working and living, there is a kind of languid pace there. And that kind of like Malick-y vibe in a horror movie feels like a weird sort of mix. And I don't think that's like the way the whole thing's about, but when it's like the forest around their house and what's in the forest and what's going on out there, I think that it does have that sort of that state. I think it's more of like Lynchian vibes, but maybe it's just because of Train Dreams, I was thinking it was like had a more of a Malick connection. And I think that turned some people off. And I think there were stretches where I was a little bit like, okay, like we can get to the next thing that's actually going to happen. But the moments that landed, I think landed really well. And there is something in this movie that is, nowhere near the level of a Sinners, but has something similar on its mind, where it's like using the horror genre to tap into these like crimes of bigotry and prejudice in American history, and how like that can lead to these domino effects to the present. Well, again, Sinners doesn't go to the present day, but Sinners goes to their present day, and this movie goes to contemporary times. So in that sense, I thought it was very interesting, and I liked some of the effects and the way that they set some of the things up. There's yeah, I'm not going to say what I was about to say because we're doing no spoilers, Antonio. So
Okay.
instead, I will pivot to note this was the movie where I was like, it's Kelly Marie Tran. There's also supporting performances from Benedict Wong and the comedian Jimmy O Yang. And had this sort of like it's an Asian American story about the kind of vague in the description. It was like a monster movie, spooky thing in the woods, Asian American story. I was like, oh, Jasmine will totally want to see this movie. And I started the description and she was like, yep, 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 yep. And the movie unfolded and she was in tears by the end of it. She was very moved. And so this was by far her favorite movie of
Oh,
this Sundance thing. And she was really connected to it. And I was the white guy who was like, yeah, it's pretty good. I'm like, okay. And like probably had this teetering on like, being a little bit lower. Like it was similar to the musical where I was like, is this like, it's not great, but is it like good? And she is like, no, this movie's great and like will be the benchmark. Like she's going to be back not on the show. She doesn't want to ever come on the pod. She doesn't like being on microphone, but she'll come to me in a year and we'll find out whatever movie Disclosure Day gets nominated for Best Picture. And she'll be like, it's no Rock Springs. Like, what are we doing? Like, why don't they nominate Rock Springs? Like, that's the one. And that's her truth. And I think that it was earned. What she connected with was there. It was earned. And I think that if you in particular have connection to that kind of immigrant history, it's the history of immigrant stories and the way in which immigrants are treated poorly, unfortunately something that is very resonant today and still feels like, oh wow, I guess we've learned very little. There's a lot in here that you can connect with. It's got like, again, as a I think what's going to happen with this movie is it's going to come out and it's a horror movie. People who like horror movies are going to be like, this isn't very scary, it's not very horror-y. This is a movie I could tell Jen, you could watch this, you'll be fun. There's a monster, there's things creeping in the shadows, like don't worry about that. Like the scariest things are stuff that you would see in a drama. So you can perfectly enjoy it. And good performances from the cast. I think particularly, Benedict Wong, unsurprisingly, is like a standout because he's Benedict Wong. I think Benedict Wong is always great. I was surprised at Jimmy O Yang for just like turning in a straight faced performance and like not in any way trying to be funny and never coming across accidentally as funny. He's joking around with people, but not in his like normal persona. And all love and respect to Star Wars alum Kelly Marie Tran. And she was doing good work. I believed she knew how to play the cello. I have no idea if she does, but when they showed her in cello scenes, it was like, okay, that's good. So yeah, I mean, this one, I think this is another one, maybe sort of like the musical, where it's like if you tick all the boxes that this movie is looking for, I think you can get really locked into this. And Jasmine's an example of that. I don't know how many people are going to be won over to this movie. Again, either because it's too genre-y or not genre enough. And also that pacing thing is something that I will probably trip some people up. But if you get on its level, it was similar to the musical, like great festival movie to have watched. I have done a midnight movie almost every time I've done an online festival, and this was one of the better ones, which maybe speaks to my poor selections of earlier midnight movies. But yeah, solid, worth checking out. If any of that intrigued you, definitely go watch it when it's around.
something I think to highlight about film festivals, but Sundance Film Festival in particular, is that this is an early year, obviously, film festival, and that a lot of these films are searching for distribution deals, right? And
Mhm.
so, a lot of the questions that you're asking about, like, what is the ideal audience for this? That's what people are, what studios who are there and shopping are asking, right? And that's part of the excitement too about like which of these, will these films just get shown like on these sort of smaller levels, or will they get like a larger will they get a larger audience? But that means that you're going to get like experiments with genre and structure. And I mean that's part of again what's exciting and part of what can be kind of like weird, right? About the slate of films at these festivals. I feel like some of the later ones, like by the time we get to Toronto, and you're often the movies that are being shown there sometimes have already debuted other places, or we already know they're kind of locked in
Mhm.
to like an awards race. Whereas Sundance, I feel like, is a little bit more sort of like it's just a lot of stuff. It's just a lot of different things. There's like a whole range. Um, Here. So every film festival has its thing and has its and it's not just tied to like the aesthetic and the place, but the timing of the year and what that means in the grand scheme. And Jen could probably give a whole thing about like what it means in the awards race. I think Sundance is less important to the awards race, although you researched a pretty rich history of its connection to awards, but because it happened so early, I think it's mostly just about like getting shown by
Yeah, I think that the again I am not Jen. We apologize to the audience that Jen is not here. No matter what the Zencaster screen says right now, I'm not Jen. But the that I think that because Sundance is also tied to like the institute and the labs, which is where like filmmakers will go. And for
yeah.
those of you who are here and you're keeping up to date on the award season, if you watch the Golden Globes when Hamnet won Best Drama, Chloe Zhao from the stage started talking to Ryan Coogler. But I remember when we were together at Sundance and I was helping you make a fire in your room because it was cold. Like that was at the Sundance Labs where young filmmakers can go to learn their craft. So I think that because they like that, and that I think that was Robert Redford's thing, was less about like this splashy festival and more about nurturing talent and getting people experience. That there's I think there's a lot more movies that Sundance can lay some claim to. So when you look at the number, you get like, here's all these movies that have had Oscar success. The percentage is low. Whereas when you're at Venice, when you're at Cannes, when you're at Toronto, that's where like studios, I mean, the indie studios, like, one of our movies is A24, we'll get to, but, it's indie studios only at Sundance. But, all the biggies, all the majors and all the streaming, they can bring movies to those things. And they are there to set up an awards run. Whereas this is more, like you're saying, kind of like, hey, is this a thing? Like, is this a movie? Like, what about this? And kind of putting it out there and seeing what the reaction is. So, yeah, it's that's a really good point that this is different from that more like hype up festivals. This is much more like you close your eyes, throw a dart, and see if it hits something or if it's a miss. Speaking of
Well,
misses, Antonio.
speaking of misses, let's move to my next movie, my alone movie, which was Rachel Lambert's Carousel. So this features a character named Noah, who's a doctor played by Chris Pine. He's going through a divorce and dealing with an anxious teenage daughter. His high school ex, Rebecca, played by Jenny Slate, comes back into town and they rekindle their romance, but not without complication. So this is
Mm.
sort of like a classic kind of Sundancey premise, a sort of messy relationship drama, but it has some structural experimentation in that we get scenes of Pine's Noah followed by scenes of Slate's Rebecca during the same intervening time. So it's like we see one character and then we sort of move back and see like what was the other character doing during this period of time, and then we have the two of them together, and it helps to sort of fill the gaps between their moments together. It's an interesting conceit, and it's rooted in the film's own sort of thematic concerns about who we are in conversation with one another and who we are outside that conversation, and how those intersections and divergences can sort of shape our lives. Um, I like all of the actors in this company, which is part of the reason why I chose this one. It also includes Sam Waterston and Katie Seagal. The ensemble all have very specific roles and relationships to one another. But for half the movie, for example, I thought that like Sam Waterston and Chris Pine were playing father and son, but eventually it's revealed that Waterston was actually friends with Pine's dead dad. But by that point, I kind of lost interest in like that thread of the film. For better or worse, like the movie really centers on the central relationship, this idea of rekindling lost love. But it's kind of an odd match. Um, Part of it was that Pine's character sort of oscillates between various modes, and I couldn't quite get a handle on him. He spends a lot of scenes like eating junk food with like an open mouth, but he still looks like Chris Pine, so kind of like whatever. And Jenny Slate is just an actress that I love in anything, and she can make me laugh with nothing but a facial gesture. And she was really funny here. It's kind of in spite, I think, of the screenplay at times. She's asked to be really earnest and so accommodating to Pine's character that at a certain point I kind of threw up my hands and was just like, I don't really care about this. And Janine watched this. This is one that Janine watched with me. She watched the musical as well, which she liked okay, but also thought like this isn't as good as theater camp, which is right. This one she just didn't like. She just didn't. She thought that the structure was kind of odd, and she just found it unpleasant. And like. Uh, you PT, you and I are big like Sopranos fans. This is I did not plan this analogy here, but you remember like in I think like the fourth season of The Sopranos, Tony and Carmela have like a huge blowout fight, right? And it's one of the high points of that series. Yeah, Whitecaps. It's an incredible episode. I think it earned maybe both of them Emmys that year. Certainly, I think Edie Falco. And what was gratifying was that you had like 4 years worth of like just tension and like being terrible to one another just sort of like blow up, right? And what was strange is that there's a moment in this film that kind of it's like kind of a Whitecaps moment where like these two people who have had, who were high school like boyfriend and girlfriend, and then like they sort of broke apart, and there's been some bitterness about that, but now they're like adults, they're like grown people, like it's understandable that there's sort of like some built up resentment, but like they have like a moment that's sort of similar. But the thing was it was like the romantic part of the romantic comedy wasn't romantic enough or funny enough to where the unpleasantness like resonated. It felt like losing something. It just sort of felt like, well, it's been kind of unpleasant all through.
Sounds like you guys should break up.
Yeah. So anyway, this is. I feel like I'm sharing too much of what I probably shouldn't. But this is all to sort of say that it just didn't quite work for me. And even though there was a lot about it that kind of like I found interesting in the execution, and still am glad that I sort of saw, like I prefer to watch kind of like a noble failure than just sort of like a nothing, a mediocre sort of like thing being executed okay. It just didn't work for me for a lot of reasons, and so I don't think I could really recommend this as either a romantic comedy or a romantic drama. So this was my disappointment of the festival.
That's unfortunate. I will say, but not to spoil the last two movies for us to discuss, I didn't really have a disappointment of this festival, which I think is a makeup for last year where I only had disappointments. I watched 5 movies last year, and I didn't think any of them were particularly great. There were, like last year, my Heights was something like the musical. Like that would have been the best movie I saw last year, which, is fine I guess. But then if you watch 3 or 4 movies that are worse than the musical, you're like, okay, well, that was money I spent. So I'm sorry that you didn't have that, but I mean that was one of those when you were like, these are the movies that I got, and I saw Carousel, and I double checked like which one was that. I was like, oh yeah, like this has Antonio's name on it. But then, sometimes the things made for us don't pan out. So my final solo movie was one called Extra Geography, and this is it's set in England, I believe, a British film. because I think it was in the international sort of section of things. And it's set. It's a contemporary movie. It's directed by Molly Manners. This is her first feature film, and written by Miriam Batty or Battier, based on a short story by Rose Tremaine, who is a very prolific novelist and short story writer who I've never heard of, but that could be because I don't pay enough attention to uh, stories written of sort of comedies of manners or exploration of manners in across the 20th century. But this is set in as a contemporary time. I'm saying that because in the Q&A afterwards, they talked about how the original story is set in the past in like the 30s or 40s. And the filmmakers were like, this is still relevant, so why not move it forward? And it's about two girls at an English boarding school who are like hyper focus, hyper planning, type A. They're not exactly like mean girls because like, I don't know if they're necessarily popular, but they are like, we're going to Oxbridge. We have our lives set out for us. We're doing all of this together. Like everything is in lockstep. And the first section of the movie has a big like late 90s Wes Anderson vibe because it's a lot of the two of them moving in tandem through everything in their life. And the sort of conceit of the story is we follow them through the summer session of their time in a boarding school, and these two girls, I guess, are known for doing a summer project, which is some sort of extracurricular challenge they put to themselves. And the challenge they put to themselves this year is they're going to fall in love with someone for the first time, and they
Yeah.
at least early on they choose their geography teacher. And it's like, okay, we're both going to fall in love with our geography teacher, who was a kind of mousy woman from New Zealand. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll talk ourselves into this. And like they're trying to dedicate themselves to complete a task. Complications arise. It's again a coming of age, sort of their dynamic shifting and getting closer, getting further apart. This was really well done. I really like this one, and it was one of those where I was like, as it was sort of had that kind of like, oh yeah, this is like a Wes Anderson riff in an English boarding school. Like, sounds good. Like, that's fun. I'm enjoying this. And it was, not like uproariously hilarious, but had a bunch of good little jokes and wry, insightful comments and some good awkward teenage things and moments. And but it was one of those movies where as it got closer and closer to the end, like the sort of nuances within the dynamics and the things that they had focused on that were sort of getting like payoffs later, and like the things that were introduced in subtle ways that didn't get like explicated directly, but still felt like resonant through the whole piece. It was one of those movies where it's like, okay, this is a deft hand who is, doing this well and not having a big sort of like, scene that's like a 3-minute explanation of like, remember this and this and this, all of that meant this thing. It was like, no, they just let you figure it out in the audience. And I ended up being really like connected emotionally with what was happening at the end of the story. It's not some, there isn't some like big, I think there was a part of it, and partially because there is a summer production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So I was getting Dead Poets Society vibes, and I was like, is this going to end similarly to Dead Poets Society? And maybe this is that it's a spoiler to say it doesn't go in that direction, but I'm glad it didn't, because it didn't have that big, like, huge build up development. It instead kind of focuses on how like smaller chipping away of the things that you are dedicated to and the things that you think are going to be permanent is just as damaging as one of those big moments in your life. So I thought that this was really good, and this felt like it has a chance to be around. Like this is the the one, not the only one, but this is of the ones we've talked about. This is the first one that felt like it could break containment of like what the description is. Like it could be a movie that someone could tell someone, okay, this is what this movie is about, but it may not sound like you want to watch it, but you should. Like this feels like this is one of those movies. So that said, if you like any illicit coming of age, British manners, sort of class, class issues within that. Girls in school, girl friendships, and again, I think I already said it, but I'll say it again: the coming of age element here. Any of those things, I think you could really latch into this movie. And it's one I will definitely, when it is available, I will recommend to Greg, especially because of those Wes Anderson vibes early on, even though I don't want him to think it'll be at a Wes Anderson level for him, because that may be overselling it.
Well, that sounds lovely and really charming. Which brings us to our last movie,
Speaking of lovely and
which
charming,
so this film, as PT mentioned, I chose this based on the description, and there was some pre-festival buzz about this, and about particularly about Channing Tatum's performance within it, and it won both the grand jury prize and the audience award, right?
correct.
And this is Beth de Arajo's Josephine. So this follows 8-year-old Josephine, remarkably played by a young girl named Mason Reeves. So early in the film, she accidentally witnesses a crime in Golden Gate Park, and basically the film unspools as she sort of has to deal with having seen the thing that she saw, and her parents have to deal with the repercussions of that, and her involvement, whether she should still be involved in the sort of like legal issues that come from that. Her parents are played with just startling empathy by Channing Tatum, who I've already mentioned, who for me has never been better than he
Mm-hmm.
is here, and Gemma Chan, also never better. Um, this is the kind of movie where the premise is so sad that it either has to be a good movie or a very bad movie. um, so I remember I had Janine take a look at the description of it, and she was like, "Nope, I'm out. I don't know what this crime is at the beginning, but probably not going to be good if they're and just the intersection of that and just like a child having to like look at it from the perspective of a child. It was just too. She was just like, I don't want to do that. Um, Last year, Jen and I think it was just Jen and me who saw that movie about poverty called Omaha,
Mm-hmm.
that fell into the sort of the latter camp of just sort of like a bad movie, like a premise that's really sad and then ended up kind of bad. And it was just a feel bad movie that didn't do anything except for successfully make you feel bad. Um, Here, I thought, from just the very startling opening scenes of Josephine to its very touching conclusion, I I I felt as you did, I think, in watching Extra Geography, that I was in the hands of like a filmmaker who was further along in their process of development and who had a real command of her craft and who was approaching this really tricky story with care and sensitivity. I tend to like Channing Tatum in kind of sillier registers and have never really taken him as a serious actor, though I liked Roofman fine. Like, I like that movie just fine. Um, but I thought the movie really used him and his physicality and his strengths as an actor to maximum effect. The way he interacts with Josephine, the ways in which he tries to protect her, all seem credible and rooted in like a love that I could understand and that seemed real to me. And the contrast between his approach as the father to Gemma Chan's approach, her character, also makes sort of perfect sense. During a car ride, Josephine asks her mother a question, like a question that a child would ask their mom, and her mother stops and then takes a moment, and like it's whether she's telling the truth or she's lying, I have my theories and my thoughts on what this is, but it just breaks your heart. And this just very small interaction that so much is said, um, with these sort of like small moments that on its face, when you think about like what is happening, it doesn't seem, it's not like these big gigantic things, especially compared to like what happens at the opening of the film. But since it's taking us through the perspective of a child, everything is sort of augmented because they are discovering like the world, right? And to experience this coming of age, to go with the extra geography, like that, to that thread. But when a child is forced to like reckon with parts of like the adult world that we typically would not want them to have to reckon with really early, it can stunt development in certain ways, and it can just lead to some really scary questions and without really good answers, right? Um, and so there's a perfect exchange halfway through the film that involves Tatum basically telling Josephine that no one will ever hurt her, and Chan looking at her husband with understanding, but also reproach and saying like, you can't tell her that. And I thought that was just such a really great, like, I think that like perfectly kind of encapsulates what this movie is trying to do, what it does really well. Um, it also has one of the most realistic and frustrating depictions of a courtroom I've seen since like Anatomy of a Fall. It's just like good lawyering in the service of like a bad person, and in the way that like the field of law works, is like that's just has to happen. But to see it again from the perspective of like a scared 8-year-old girl really does help you see how sort of tricky our system is and how daunting it is from this perspective. So I think it uses the perspective incredibly well, incredibly effectively. Um, and I was really stunned by it. I was blown away. What were your thoughts, PT?
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like I didn't have, and maybe it's because I had also had another movie I saw that I liked like well in extra geography, but I
Fair.
did watch this one last, and I liked it quite a bit. I thought this was really good. I wasn't quite up at the space where you were about like, oh, it's that good, but I think it's one of those movies I have thought about a lot, like I mean, it's only been a day since I've watched it, but in the day since I watched it, I've been sort of kicking some things around, and I think that some of the all the positive things you were saying, I think are absolutely true. I don't disagree with any of that. I'm actually glad to hear that you really connected with that courtroom scene, because there was maybe just like one or two elements of that where I was like, oh, this, I mean, it's just so brutal for all the things that you were saying. And I was like, is this like too brutal? Is this over dramatizing what might happen? So to hear you
Mm.
say, no, I think this is actually showing like, it's obviously nothing is a one-to-one to a real courtroom, but that like, that you connected with it that way. I had said I must appeal to Antonio to make sure that's okay. The stuff that I think as the movie was unfolding, I was finding frustrating. It took me a while to realize it was intentional, that it wasn't, it was frustrating choices made by the well-intended grown-up characters around this girl, the parents and the detective, and also some of the court appointed or maybe prosecutorial adjacent folks. Because there was a little window where I was just sort of like, oh, this is just all adults make dumb decisions. Like all adults like handle things as poorly as they can, which is unfair and also super easy for me, again, the person without a child, to be like, why don't you just say the right thing? Why don't you just do the thing that you should do in this traumatic situation? But it took me a little bit longer than it probably should have to lock into how much the movie is exclusively from the perspective and point of view, in terms of the narrative style, and just like with the details we get are just like what this girl is seeing and what she's bringing in. And so the things that I was like, how come no one is doing this or talking about this? I think in retrospect, having, actually seeing the sequence of the whole movie, it's like, oh, well, like the parents would be talking about that in situations where the daughter couldn't hear, like they would be trying to, and then like what we see is like how it kind of leaks out or bubbles out or bursts out, those sort of tensions and dynamic and concerns and worry. And so again, similar to what I was saying about extra geography, but I think more so. I think there's a reason this movie got these awards and is going to be in conversations in a way extra geography I don't think will be. It's just like you said, so sure-handed, like so like fine-tuned in terms of details that are put out that like you could leave there. You can take it with you. The movie is not going to like hit you over the head with a lot of the sort of connections and a lot of the developments and the way things are progressing for the characters and in the dynamics between them, which I thought was really great. This is, I think unfair to in any way compare the movie to Nickel Boys, but it has a couple of moments where it's like similar to times in Nickel Boys, where it's like when a young person like sees something and is fixated on something, and it's like, this is the thing I'm going to remember from this moment, is like, this bug flying the way it was flying when like other stuff's happening that's like they don't want to deal with or think about. Just reminding me of the magnet on the fridge in during a phone call in Nickel Boys.
Yeah,
So like that kind of eye was like that was great. That was really strong. And again, I found Channing Tatum's father character fully well intentioned, frustrating. Like I didn't like agree with a
sure,
lot of the perspectives he had,
sure.
but the way in which he unveils and sort of unwraps his character over the course of the movie, like was really really winning. And I think did a really good job. And there's, there were things where, again, this is said with nothing but love and respect, that the movie ended and Jasmine's like, that won the prize and Rock Springs didn't, because she likes Rock Springs. But then like 2 hours later, like from bed, she like sent me a text message to be like, oh, you know what I was just thinking about, like had like an insight into something, a sequence of things that happened in Josephine. So it's like, it sticks, it lingers in your mind. And I think this is a movie with a real delicate balance. It's gonna be hard to get people in to watch it. Like for everybody who maybe was like, Hamnet, oof, I don't know, like that sounds sad. Like it's like, what if Hamnet was sad in a totally different way, but also maybe sadder? Yeah, it's but I think this is this was a very very strong movie, and I'm glad I got to watch it, because I think that I didn't pick this one. I thought it sounded too heavy in the description. So kudos to the to the jury and also the audience for giving it prizes, so it showed up in my list.
I I did not get the tickets early enough to where I could grab the winner. Like they had only a certain number of slots for like getting the. But I had a sneaking suspicion that like this one was the one of the ones that I could see that was the most likely to take the prize, if only because I feel like just like a Sundance or a film festival crowd, they want to be moved, right? Like a movie like the musical is going to be fun, but like you want something like I feel like they're craving something that's going to like break something in them and it's going to like make them weep. And this seemed like it could be that, and so it wasn't totally surprising. I mean, there's only so many films that are in competition anyway. When I saw that it had taken the prize, I do think it's a hard watch and it's a hard sell. I think that's why you need Channing Tatum in it. You need like actors, an actor like that, um, who will hopefully draw in people. But I think that similar to like how audience didn't flock to see Dwayne Johnson in like the Smashing Machine, which was also not a good movie. um, that I'm not sure that like if you love Channing Tatum that this is the register that you want to see him in, but I think that would be a mistake because I think that he does really really good work here. The whole entire cast is the young lady who plays Josephine. It
Oh,
really is just
okay.
sort of like a revelation. And one of the things you mentioned that one feature of the online film festival is that they attach the Q&A afterwards. I will. My only complaint about the Q&As were that the video quality was so bad that I thought I was watching like like home movies from like the 90s. But um, but it was nice. This was the one where I was like, I actually want to hear what they have to say. Like after Carousel, I was like, I don't care. I don't want to hear what you have to say about that movie. But this one, if for no other reason, I just wanted to hear the young lady talk, um, and because it's such heavy subject matter, and I just wanted to. I think I just wanted to make sure she was okay. And it was really nice to just see her be goofy and like and be silly with Channing Tatum, who, as you pointed out, PT in a text thread, was dressed like Dick Tracy. Maybe again, part of it was the video was strange
Yeah.
and like I couldn't quite see, but like it did seem like he's wearing a lot of clothes and nothing else, for being indoors. And I know it's like winter in there, but whatever. But anyway, it was nice. That part was nice, but also to hear the director and to hear her process. I think I remember her saying that she started this project in like 2014 or something, like a long time ago. Like this
Yeah.
is something like a long gestating project, and it makes sense, right? It felt like a film that had gone through multiple iterations and that she'd been very careful about, and thoughtful about, and like and how gratifying is it, right, for an artist to spend, over a decade working on something and then to finally be able to unveil it to an audience and to see them, feel genuinely moved by it, and to watch the actors and the other artists involved in it clearly being proud of it, and they should be proud of it, right? Like that's the part of the magic of like a film festival. So that was really lovely, and I'm glad I saved it for last.
Yes, me too. It was
Yeah.
the last one I watched as well, and yeah, I mean, also, and to keep speaking about the sort of Sundance legacy and the sort
Mhm.
of infrastructure of it, as part of that story, like she started it in 2014, she had a residency. I think it was she said 2018 or 2019 in the
Yeah.
Sundance labs and filmed three of
Yeah.
the scenes, and like that's how she's worked on getting it off the ground, was sort of having this having this experience of being able to do that. I do think ultimately Channing Tatum's coat was more like a dark orange, but the initial far away camera, it just had that bright like
There.
1990 Warren Beatty yellow, and I was like, what
Yeah.
what is happening? But and I will also say, without naming any names about or naming any titles of movies from previous years, I do like that what they do now is they put the Q&As at the end. What they did for a little while, I think they started doing this because initially it was basically just outsiders getting the access that regular festival goers were getting to the online festival when there was no in-person festival for 1 or 2 years because of the pandemic. So it would open with a little like introductory, not Q&A, but a little introductory conversation, in the same way that I think In the Room, someone from Sundance gets up, brings up the director, they talk for a few minutes, and then they go, all right, introduce the movie, here's the movie, da da da. And there were multiple movies that Jasmine and I would put on again in previous years, not this year. And the introduction would be over. It would be like, we already know this movie will be bad. Like that person sounds like an idiot who doesn't know what they're doing. And I don't mean idiot in terms of like, I don't know, but it's just sort of like, oh, you don't sound like you have any like connect, like you think you're telling some like story that, like, I don't know. Jasmine's whole thing is just sort of like any movie that's set in a workplace that's made by someone who's never had to work anywhere in their life. It's like, have you ever been in an office or have you ever worked in a store? Like, I don't think you have. So, I don't know if I care. So, yeah, that was a good like hearing from the director. Like the flip side of that is when you hear from the director, and you're just sort of like, yeah, like this is a passion project coming from a place of sincerity and truth and experience. Hopefully not the same exact direct experience, but just channeling the idea of childhood, traumatic childhood events and perception and perspective, and bringing that forward, as you said, through over a decade of work, which is great. Do you think, real brief? I actually, because I don't have Jen's computer, I cannot trigger the Oscar Watch sound clip. Jen's welcome to edit in if she'd like. Do you think that Josephine or any of the other movies you saw, but I'm assuming we're just talking about Josephine, has a chance at any Oscar conversation a year from now?
I think it's possible. I think Channing Tatum in supporting actor, I could see if the movie gains traction and enough people see it. I think it's possible for a regional screenplay. Um, I think I I I think that Reeves, Mason Reeves, who is I think the main reason to watch the film, she's the lead of the film. I think it would be a stretch to say that she's in the running for like best actress,
Right.
but in critic awards for like outstanding newcomer or whatever,
Like BAFTA has that, like a young, best young
yeah,
performer.
for something like that, I could definitely see. I mean, look, I only saw three movies. One of them definitely is out. The musical, I don't think. I think the musical feels like an artist who is like on their way to like making like their best work.
Mhm.
Um, Josephine was the only one that for me of the ones that I saw that I was like, this is something that could come out in any movie theater in the country, and if people saw it, they'd be like, this is a gifted filmmaker. This is a movie that's worth seeing. So, but it's just a matter of if it can gain traction and can get eyeballs on the movie over time, because it's asking a lot of its
Mhm.
audience. But I think it's possible. What do you think, PT? Of the things that you saw, what has Oscar chances?
Well, to end where we began, I do think the Nuisance Bear could very easily be nominated in documentary.
Sure.
I say that with very little experience and knowledge, but like it feels like, yep, this is a documentary that would move people, and feels like, that doesn't have the traps that the documentary branch seem to. It doesn't have celebrities. It doesn't have any sort of big money, or it's not like a Netflix thing. So I could see that, but it also would be just as equally not surprised if some other things replace it, and it doesn't. It ends up being a Daughters or something, where it's people talk about that was a good documentary. It was popular at Sundance. Anyway, and then move on. I don't think any of the other ones. Again, if Jasmine did her own version of an awards, Rock Springs has a Sinners level amount of nominations for her category. I don't think that would actually go anywhere. I agree with you fully on the musical. Extra geography, I doubt. Like, again, I think that's going to be like a nice movie that ends up sort of in a bottle rocket zone, maybe, where it's like, that's like his first movie, or her first movie. Well, that's really good. You should go back and watch that. Maybe in a really soft year that ends up with adapted screenplay, but I don't think so. But I think with Josephine, in looking through the feature film nominations that for movies that came out of Sundance, there's occasionally movies that get some below the line attention. I think Whiplash, which is another movie that got both the grand jury and the audience prize. That got editing and that got a sound Oscar in addition to supporting actor. And there's, but for the most part, like the big sort of wins that come out of Sundance films are in supporting acting roles and screenplay categories. And it would not surprise me if Josephine has a best supporting actor push for Channing Tatum, and a sort of like, isn't this guy great? Like, hasn't he made so much money for all you people out here in Hollywood? Like, vote for, get him in, get a nomination. And then original screenplay, as you said, it could also be a cuspy, like a Sorry Baby, where it's like, maybe it gets an acting nomination, maybe it gets screenplay, maybe it's the 9th or 10th movie that gets into Best Picture, and then ends up getting nothing because and then everyone's kind of bummed. So I think it's in that zone. It will be, this is how it always ends. I feel like in these Sundance conversations we don't really know what's coming, what's happening in the rest of the year. If it's a year like last year, I don't think Josephine gets anything. Like, it was too strong a year. If it's a year like, I don't know, like 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago? Felt a little bit like, we've got some extra slots. Like, we'll figure out, like, we could put some things in here. Like, who knows? Then maybe there is, there's a chance there. But I think it will certainly be in the conversation. It is the dominant movie coming out of this festival because it won these awards. And I think, when I was looking through articles just to check out some overall conversations, a lot of the headlines were like, what are movies to think about, to look out for from Sundance besides Josephine? So it's like, okay, well, Josephine's already the like default, like they already know that. So yeah, I think that'll be there in the conversation. It'll be interesting to see what happens and what other people think. I don't think it has a distributor yet. I think that it ended not having
Heard
been
anything?
purchased. So that's also one of those. It could be a movie everyone is like, wow, like very moving and very touching. We can't sell it, so we don't know what we're going to do. And then who knows? Maybe it ends up in a hard truths area where it's with Bleecker Street, and then no one ever knows it's out, and then it never gets some critics prizes, and that's it. Sad. All right, Antonio. Thank you for sharing Sundance conversation with me. Doing a quick take. Is it quick? It's an hour and plus, but that's okay. It's relatively quick, I guess, to cover 7 movies. That's not so bad. Where can folks find you out there on the internet? And Jen has informed me there's only one place.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Aelefano, Aelefano. Where can they find you, PT?
I feel like we have to unlock Antonio's Finstas. Like there's secret accounts out there, and just like see where they're the shadow realm that you're walking into. But you can also find me on Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. You can also find the show there at LTR Pod. You can look for us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com. You can also just subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening right now. Hit add, hit follow, hit plus, hit heart, hit subscribe, hit whatever the mechanic is. You can do that, and you'll get new episodes from us as promised earlier. We've I believe recently, or if not recently, soon we'll post our winners for our the LTRs for our letters awards. And we also have 3 more Best Picture nominees we haven't covered yet that we're hoping to get to in the next few weeks, and keep building up to the Academy Awards, which are now a month and a half away. How fun. That's all. Take care. Thank you so much. And as always, long live Robert Redford.
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. You'll also receive occasional reviews of new Star Wars and Marvel.
I don't have anything good for like the post thing.
You don't want to sing the chorus from 9/11, the 9/11 song.
I mean, I will say it's probably a problem for the musical that I can't remember exactly the song.
I just remember the opening line was like 9/11, 9/11.